MFS Securities. We are an education and information firm on the Gold Coast in Queensland, Australia. And every Monday morning I go through what happened globally around the world and try to forecast what we may see these coming weeks. I show you how investors and traders, how can they may make money on our stock market and globally. I show you what is hot and what is not, and what you should hold and what you should fold. And by the way, if you have any particular feedback you would like to give us, we would really appreciate hearing from you. Well, overnight and from around the globe, we start with the Dow. We can see here the Dow on Saturday morning has actually closed slightly down. Let's call that flat. The S&P 500 was up 15 points or 0.5%. And by the way, you can see the previous two trading days down 6.4 and then 44 points. So obviously over the last 3 days we have a positive performance for the S&P 500. The Nasdaq Technology Index also had a rise of 120 points or 1.3%, and again over the last 3 days had a good performance. In Europe, the Stoxx 50 index, which comprises most major European markets, was down 1.4%, erasing the gain the previous day. However, over the last 3 days, we still have 1.7% rise over the last 3 days. In London, the FTSE 100 index was down 2.3% on Saturday, and the DAX was actually down 1.7%. In Japan on Friday, the market was flat, and in China, the Shanghai index was slightly up. On our market on Friday, we were down 1.6%, down 95 points. However, look what happened the previous day. We had 56 points, 76 points up, and the day before was down 5. So you can see over the last 3 days, we were slightly down on the market. But previous to the last 3 days, we had beautiful rise thanks to the banks. And the futures this morning are showing that the most likely the market will open down 24 points. Gold on Saturday morning was trading at 1,751 US per ounce. Silver, another rise of 3% on top of the 1.2% the day before. Over the last 3 days, silver had beautiful performance. And when you look at the gold, down $3.50, up $1.50, so actually a rise over the last 3 days. And soybeans, a further drop, 840 US per bushel. About 3 days ago was trading at 848. The Australian dollar, 66.7, a rise, will give you 60.05 euro cents and 54.01 British pence, and also 107 New Zealand. And by the way, if you want to know what's happening over the last 2 days in terms of iron ore had actually had a beautiful rise on Saturday morning. It's now trading above the 101 US dollars per ton. Now looking at the American chart, you can see here the week on week. Again, the market closed with a green candle, not at the very top, but it actually receded some of the gain over the week. But the most important thing is we actually traded for quite a number of weeks around the 50% retracement from the very high to the very low in recent times, and then decided to go and test the 61.8 Fibonacci retracement. Now it is very likely that it will stay above the 61.8 this week. Let's hope that will happen. In terms of the daily charts, looking at the indicators, we've got the parabolic stop and reverse shown by those red dots being below the candles. That's bullish. The stochastic happens to be bullish above the 80%, And the 9-day, which is actually shown by the dashed orange line above the black dashed line, which is a 21. 9-day moving average above the 21-day moving average, that's bullish. And the candle, of course, flirting with the upper band of the Bollinger Band. So that's obviously still very positive. Went above the band, retraced below it. Obviously, we're going to really test that particular band this coming week. In terms of over 2 weeks, we like to look at 1 week and then compare what happened collectively over 2 weeks. You can see the American market is very positive despite the flat ending on Saturday morning. The US dollar bearish 2.1% over 2 weeks. Slight decrease last week, but the major drop was actually the week before. Mind you, the 2.1% is the 2 weeks collective, the 2 weeks together. The Australian dollar had nearly 4% rise over the last 2 weeks, mainly because of the rise of the last week of 2%. And obviously that's nearly 1.9% rise the week before, giving you a collective 3.9% rise over 2 weeks. In terms of gold, even though we've seen a rise of $8 US per ounce last week, putting the 2 weeks together, we have a negative 2 weeks of down 0.7%. However, silver is the performer here, 8.4% rise over 2 weeks and gain of 4.5% last week. 2 weeks of continuous rise in silver. Crude oil, West Texas crude oil, again a rise of 18.8% over 2 weeks. Part of it from the week last week of 5.2%. And if you're interested in the other commodities, all you have to do is talk to us. Now, Bitcoin, week on week, was trading at 9,440 US, a rise of 180 US dollars over the full week. And that converts to approximately 14,245 Australian dollars, a rise of 70 Australian dollars over the full week. Now, looking at our that's the weekly recommendation, that's the forecast. We have designed a mechanical system at FS Securities over the last 25 years, and looking at indicators over 2 time frames. For instance, the investor, we look at the monthly and the weekly, and provided 5 indicators out of 8 on the monthly, conveyed to the weekly, and we continue to have 5 indicators out of 8 saying the same thing. We go either bullish, neutral, or bearish. So for instance, the Nasdaq, for the investor, which is again, that's the monthly and the weekly, we have a bull indicators. Then we have look at the weekly and the daily for the traders, and we continue to have bullish forecast for the Nasdaq. And by the way, if you want to learn about how we actually interpret the technical analysis, we run various education courses to teach you how to look at charts and predict from the forecast what we most likely see the coming weeks. Here we have the daily, and again the daily changes. Again, we look at the weekly and the daily, and of course they change based on the daily. These recommendations are given at the beginning of the week, or I should say at the end of the week, giving you forecast for this coming week. However, they don't change. These will continue to be the same for the whole week. However, these will change based on what you see on the daily and of course the weekly. The weekly doesn't change, the monthly doesn't change, but the daily will change. So you can see most likely what you see here at the end of last Saturday, not yesterday or the day before, but the week before we had neutral, and that remains neutral irrespective. However, these can change according to the daily changes during the week. Again, what we can see here, the American market bullish for the Nasdaq. This is what we see on Saturday morning. For the very aggressive and the aggressive traders, we see the Dow bullish forecast, and coffee bearish, and the American basket of currencies bearish, the Australian dollar bullish. And again, this will be put on our website in short time. Looking at our daily and weekly charts for the ASX 200, we actually retraced about 50% of the highest point and the lowest point. For the first time in many weeks, we managed to actually go above the 50-week retracement, and there we are at the moment below it. We closed below it. Are we going to retrace back above it? Obviously, time will tell. It's not going to happen on Monday, but it could happen at the end of the week. And you can see here the daily. On Friday, we had a negative candle indicating a drop in the market, as I mentioned earlier, 96 points drop. However, we had 1, 2, 3, 4 days of very strong performance on our daily charts. Looking at the indicators, the parabolic stop and reverse bullish because it's below the candle, the stochastic bullish, and what I mean bullish means that we expect the market to go higher. When we say bearish, we expect the market to go down. The 9-day moving average, represented by the orange dotted line, is above the 21-day moving average. That's bullish. The candles happen to be flirting with the upper band of the Bollinger Band. That's again very positive. So the daily chart tells you that our market is bullish, even though we expect the market to go down today at the start. However, over the week we may expect a retracement back above the 50% gain retracement. Looking at our market, that's the week and the 2 weeks. Our market gauge, which is made up by two major sectors, that is the financial and the materials. When both of these sectors are bullish, as you can see here, our market usually drags the whole market upwards as well. When the two sectors are down, usually the market is dragged down across the whole market. Well, the financial sector last week was 11% higher, and the materials was up nearly 2%. Over the last 2 weeks collectively, the financial was up 10.4% and the materials was up 8.1%. And look what happened to the ASX 200, up 6.5%. The only sector in the red is the healthcare. 2 weeks of negative performance, 2.5% last week, and probably about 2.3% negative the week before. Put them together, we end up with 4.7% drop in the healthcare sector over 2 weeks. Looking at our top companies, we have here ANZ Bank up 17% over last week. Obviously the week before was negative, so when we put the 2 weeks together, we end up with nearly 16% rise over 2 weeks. Now we can also see that NAB had last week a good performance of 16.1%. Again, negative, slight negative the week before of 1%. Putting the 2 weeks together, we end up with 15.2. CBA had 8.6%, not as good as ANZ and NAB. Westpac also had good week last week of 14.2%, again minus 2% the week before. However, 2 weeks together we get nearly 13% rise. Negative companies, Worley Parson, 7.2% drop last week. However, we find that over 2 weeks together it was up 6.3%. So obviously it had a very good week 2 weeks ago. Newcrest Mines almost steady over 2 weeks, 1% rise. Again, this will be actually put on our website shortly. Okay, now in terms of the sectors, again you can see that for the daily, most sectors are bullish for the aggressive and the very aggressive trader. Gold bullish for all type of investors and traders, and materials again bullish across all type of traders. Investors, by the way, trade month over month. Maybe sometimes they put their stocks in the bottom drawer and forget about it for several months. However, traders are more active, as you can see here. Obviously the conservative trader are less active than the very aggressive trader, and of course you have to actually assess your risk appetite to know whether you are an investor or a very aggressive trader. For the very aggressive trader and the aggressive trader, we are bearish this morning on consumer staples. Consumer staples is obviously, we're talking about the Coles, Woolworths, people that you are really need to have rather than want to have. Okay, now in terms of the stocks, Newcrest Mines, even though it was negative last week, we still have a bullish indicators across all type of investors and traders, and so is TPG, again across all four. BHP, with the exception of the investor, everybody else is bullish at the moment, and Rio would be almost the same. Rio bullish for all type of traders except the investor is not in yet. But remember, the investor is actually somebody is extremely conservative and wait for confirmation in the market before they do anything at all, and sometimes they are about a month or two behind everybody else. So again, depends on who you are. Are you an investor or a very aggressive trader, or somewhere in between? Woolworths bearish for the aggressive and the very aggressive trader, and again this slide will be put on our website shortly. In terms of last week, you can see that last week we had 34% of all the stocks declining, but look at the volume. The volume on Friday was nearly 5 billion transactions, the highest volume in many months. So why is that so? Why most stocks were down and the volume was up? Again, this is actually is telling us something about the market. On Friday there was jittery about what President Trump was going to do about the trade deal with China. Obviously, after our market closed, we found out that America was not going to take a very tough stance against China as far as the trade deal is concerned. They only said that as far as Hong Kong is concerned, they're going to take the special privilege treatment they treat Hong Kong. But actually it came much less severe than what the market expected. So again, that volume may have actually precipitated very concern about the market traders and investors. However, we might see the volume today a bit less than 5 billion. Week on week, you can see for the last 2 weeks, the advances exceeded declines. Okay, now what we do every week and every day, we look at stocks that have outperformed the market, and by looking at volume. So for instance, when we look at FMG, which is Fortescue, last week it had 114 million transactions over the week. However, the average volume over the last 50 weeks is about 75.8 million transactions. The price went up by 2.4%, and guess what? The volume was nearly 50% above the average. ASX, which is a company that actually has all the transactions on the market, the price was up 5% and slight above the average volume. Goodman Group price was up 5%, and again slight increase over the average volume, the week average volume. For the mid cap, we've got all these companies here, and again this will be shown on our website shortly. In terms of daily average volume, again Fortescue on Friday, that's the daily volume. The daily volume is 14.5 million transactions per day, and on Friday it actually saw 59 million transactions. And guess what? This morning we know that the iron ore price went up by nearly 5%, above $101 US per ton, an expectation of the average price of iron ore. So you can see Oil Search also had a good rise in its price, 1.5%, and 58% increase in the volume. CSL went down, and that's actually down the second or third day in a row. The price went down nearly 4%, and the volume was quite huge on Friday. And look at the weekly. Now CSL was not down on the volume in weekly, but certainly on the daily we have all these companies were actually down in the above in the price, and the volume was up as well. So again, if you want to trade any of these companies, go to the website and find this particular slide. Okay, finally we show you what we traded at the moment in CFDs. We have 5 positions on the ASX 200. At the moment we're losing $34, but ANZ Bank and Westpac we're making some very good profit, and BHP slight drop. We are actually bearish on BHP, and I think BHP will go higher today, so we'll probably close BHP and wait for ANZ Bank and Westpac to perform during the week. Okay, before we finish, the presentation, as you know, was prepared for general advice only. It contained general information, and we did not take into account your investment objectives. Obviously, we don't know your objectives, we don't know your financial situation, and we don't know your particular needs. So anyone, if you need any transaction, please consult with us before you take the transaction, or talk to your professional advisor. At FS Securities, our trading decisions are based on technical analysis to determine the trend without ignoring the fundamental factors. Remember, the trend is your friend until the end. Whilst the charts are showing the trend, additional analysis may tell you if the trend is no longer your friend. So if you are concerned about a possible correction or a large fall in the market, you can always take insurance against it. And if you want to know why, all you have to do is ask. So if you want to ask any questions, obviously you need to write to me at george@fssecurities.com.au. FS stands for full service. George@fssecurities, plural, fssecurities.com.au. If you call my mobile from overseas, 61 is the country code, you don't need the 0. From overseas it's 61-411-259526. If you're ringing my mobile from a local phone, it's 0411-259526. Okay, well, happy trading, and I hope you make some money this week. So take care.